Hi, good morning. I am Heidi Bergoglio, Committee Chair for Cub Scout Pack 55 here in Great Falls. And we are coming to you today to talk again about the next step in our course on beekeeping. We're going to talk about honeybees today, the queen bee, the worker bees, and the drone bees. And in each of those categories, we'll discuss the physical attributes, life cycle, and their task or job inside of the hive. So thank you for joining us again. Let's get started.
Go.
So part of why we will discuss the different physical attributes of each of the residents of your beehive is when we get to the portion of our program where we're talking about the inspection. One of the things that you are going to be looking for in your hive is queen rightness. Queen rightness is either seeing evidence that the queen has been in an area of your hive recently by noticing that there are eggs in the cells, or once you become attuned to the behaviors of your honeybees, you will be able to find your one queen bee in a colony of thousands and thousands with your bare eyes, because you will start to notice what it looks like as she's walking through. So as you see in this photograph here, there's a fairly congested frame of bees. And if you look in the just off the middle here in the low or in the right hand area, you'll notice a bee who is larger and has a more extended abdomen here. And that is our queen bee. And she goes from cleansed, prepared, empty cell to empty cell, dropping her abdomen into the bottom of the cell, laying eggs, and she will lay up to 3,000 eggs a day. And as she progresses through the hive, the worker bees will, they sort of make a ring around her. If you notice, all of the honeybees that are next to her are pointed towards her, and it's because they are doing some sort of service. See the heads here? Oop. See the bee heads here are all pointed towards the queen bee. So in front of her, they are cleansing her way so that all of the cells that she will lay eggs in are cleaned and ready. They also feed her and clean her so that she is able to continue laying 3,000 eggs per day. She's fed a steady diet of royal jelly, and they clean up after her. They clean her body so that there is never a chance that she would have one of the mites on her or some sort of disease. And then they clean up her waist as she goes through. So this is the bullseye, if you will, that beekeepers start to notice when they are doing their inspections in their hive. But let's take a moment to look at the queen herself. So next slide. Our queen bee is perhaps the largest and longest lived resident in each hive. There's a debate among beekeepers whether the hive exists to serve her or she exists to serve the hive. She's a royal slave, if you will, whose primary job is producing eggs and continuing the DNA or the life material of this particular colony of bees. It's important to understand her life cycle in terms of math, and it's very consistent. Once you become a beekeeper, you might also want to do some Google research on your own of the life cycle of an Africanized queen bee, which is slightly shorter by 2 days, and the impact that that has to our regular not Africanized bee or Apis mellifera. So anyways, Our queen bee's life cycle, she has a gestation of 16 days. That's from egg to hatching. And a queen bee is laid in a large, it looks like a peanut shaped cell. And we'll look at this more later when we're looking in different areas of the hive and what the comb looks like. But she's laid into a large peanut type cell, and her gestation is 16 days. She is raised exclusively on a diet of royal jelly, which gives her that expanded abdomen, which is all full of the stuff of life that will make all of the eggs that she will lay throughout her life cycle. A regular egg that has not been treated any different can be transferred from one of the traditional cells in the colony into the queen cup. Can be transferred for up to 3 days. The first 3 days is what the rest of the colony has to move that egg over. So once she goes through her 16 days of gestation, going from egg to larva to pupa, and then becomes an insect, she will emerge. And again, she is fed exclusively a diet of royal jelly, which is a specialized hive product that the worker bees make from the nectar and pollen that they bring into the hive. After a couple days after the queen bee emerges, she will go out on what is called nuptial flight. This is the only time that the queen bee ever leaves the hive, with the exception of swarming, in the event that your hive decides to reproduce through the process of a swarm. So she will go on a nuptial flight and mate with as many as a dozen drone bees while she is out, and collect the spermatozoa that she will need to fertilize the eggs for the remainder of her lifespan, which can be 3 to 5 years in the event that the beekeeper leaves her alone. In wild colonies, we don't know exactly how long the queen bee will live, but her life tends to be much longer than your average worker bee. Her job, again, or her caste within the colony, she is only one. Rarely there are two queens in a hive, but there is a situation where nature and evolution have their role very strongly in a beehive. And when the queens that have been incubated in the queen cups emerge, they will in the hive for each other. They will hunt each other down, and then they will fight to the death. And the strongest queen will be the one who will stay in that hive and continue to perpetuate that colony's unique DNA by laying eggs. She emits pheromones, which gives direction to the hive of what they need to do, whether or not there's enough food there, whether or not there's adequate space for her to continue laying, and whether or not she's there. It's fascinating when you have a hive, if you remove the queen bee or something happens where you're doing your inspection and you squish her or something between the frames, the presence of the hive, the energy of the hive immediately changes. They'll go from being very content and sort of humbling to a loud growl, and it's very clear that there's a certain level of discontent. Sometimes they'll even start to sting more aggressively. So the queen bee is very important. Without her, the hive would not continue to exist. The rest of the bees will protect her with their lives. She does nothing but lay eggs, and there's a debate whether she is a monarch or a slave. So she is also the only mated female in one colony. And one of the ways that you will start to identify the queen bee when you first become a beekeeper is by her physical attributes. So one of the primary things that people notice when they look at the queen bee is the longer abdomen. She has that extended abdomen that is full of all of those eggs that she will lay throughout her life. Another thing that is a pronounced difference between the queen bee and the worker bees is her thorax. It looks like a black dot. A lot of the time there won't be fuzziness and it's sort of shiny, but it'll catch your attention when you're doing your inspections. The thorax can be a point of confusion when we look at the difference between a drone bee and the queen bee, and we'll look at that a little more when we have an image of them side by side. The thorax is also where queen bees tend to be marked by beekeepers. I personally am not a fan of the practice of marking queen bees. I think it's fine for people to want to work with domesticated animals, but the marking of a queen bee a lot of the time, especially if you use honeybees that have been bred for their hygienic qualities, where they do a lot of grooming, which is important during the varroa concerns, that the hygienic bees, or small cell bees they're called sometimes, will pick their queen bee to death trying to get a paint spot off of that thorax. So learn early to become a competent beekeeper by looking for the overall physical attributes, but also that bullseye that I showed you on our last slide. The bullseye of the bees around her, and also the pattern of where the eggs are laid in the hive, and that will make it so that your queen bee can live a long and healthy life. So avoid marked queens.